A lot of you out there have wondered why we haven't dipped our toes into the import PSX pool when we've taken a look at so many Saturn games. The short answer is shifting priorities, but in an effort to reach further into the shmups pantheon of ages past, we snagged a Japanese PSX unit and got to work building our library. Along the way, one game unexpectedly stood out. Stahlfeder is a Yoko vertical shooting game developed and published by the obscure Santos exclusively for the PlayStation in 1995. Its claim to fame at the time of its release was blending 2D and 3D visuals together, in a way that was seen quite a bit going forward. But how does it do it differently? Why so obscure? And why is its cover so amazing? Let's take a closer look. On the game's outset, players can select one of 4 different planes with varying speed, firepower, and armor. Each aircraft is quite a bit different than the last, which should allow for some decent choice for players with different gameplay tastes. Despite the choices available, the default ship known as the Blaustern is a general well-balanced plane that should work for most players. So let's cut straight to the chase. Stahlfeder more or less takes all of its gameplay hooks straight out of Raiden, with only a couple of twists. Movement is nothing out of the ordinary, just standard 8-way control with no DualShock support. In place of a ship stock, players instead have a segmented life gauge that will deplete if they are hit. Once again, each ship has variable armor, so while one might be slower, it may also have much more endurance. When the player's health is completely empty, they are destroyed and the game is over unless the player continues. The player's life gauge is typically refilled between stages and can also be recovered through shield pickups dropped by carrier ships. Higher difficulties also have fewer credits and recover less health between stages. Players can shoot the plane's main weapons with the cross button. These weapons can be powered up to a total level of 5 through pickups dropped from carrier ships. The main shot is powered up when these pickups are red. Players also have a laser-style sub-weapon that is fired with the square button. This weapon is typically very powerful, but usually has limited screen coverage or range. It too can be powered up to a total level of 5 when weapon pickups cycle to blue. Finally, players have access to a complement of bomber attacks indicated by an extensive stock in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. A huge amount of bombers can be amassed over time, and they're deployed with the circle button. They can be saved and used in various situations that call for them. Once again, bombs are dropped from carrier ships. So, pretty simple, but what does Stahlfeder do differently? Well, not a ton. Basically, it's Raiden, with 4 ships and a life gauge, and players can use lasers and machine guns at will without requiring a pickup to change the fire. Not both at once though, of course. If it all sounds pretty neat, then yeah, I'd agree, except that Stahlfeder's difficulty is almost insultingly low. Even on normal, Stahlfeder is an exceptionally easy 1cc. Players will definitely want to ratchet things up to get the most out of what Stahlfeder offers, and even then, veterans should have no problem breezing through the game's 6 stages. The good news is that Stahlfeder's control is spot freaking on. It feels really good throughout the whole game. In the end, there's nothing completely offensive from a gameplay standpoint, difficulty notwithstanding, but there's also not a ton going on here either. That said, we enjoyed the gameplay and still appreciate that while Stahlfeder is going to have limited mileage for veterans, it's fudging great for Super Green novices. Another super simple aspect to Stahlfeder is its scoring. Basically, all that's at play here is a system that awards points for destroying enemies and collecting power-ups past max. That's more or less all there is to it. Completing any given stage will award the player with a bonus score based on the stage completed, shield remaining, and number of bombs in the stock. This is tallied up and added to the score when the next stage begins. Stahlfeder obviously does not have access to online leaderboards, but scores can be saved to a memory card, unlike the settings in the config menu, go figure. Again, there's not a ton to go on here, but as long as everything is being blasted away and all of the power-ups that are dropped are collected, a million-plus score should be reachable by the end of the game. As far as games with style over substance go, Stahlfeder's presentation definitely eclipses the gameplay it features, even if, once again, there's not a ton to the game. Visually, Stahlfeder is rock solid with a good amount of detail on everything from the backgrounds to the enemies and the player's ships. The player's aircraft is definitely derived from a pre-rendered model, but features a good amount of frames in its left and right turning animations. Enemies are also afforded a good amount of animation as well, and the bosses are fully polygonal for extra effect. Some large enemies like this plane here seem a little out of place though, and some of the animation on the 3D elements and explosions in general leave a bit to be desired. There are all kinds of little details in the background throughout the game as well, including a number of elements that pop up and out from the flat 2D backdrop using 3D polygons. Additional parallax is also employed in some areas as well, but there are also missed opportunities, like the reflective pool showing the sky but no enemies, player ships, or shots. You can still blast away the trees though, so that counts for something. It's also neat that all of the planes have their own pilot characters, but outside of an image of them in front of an FMV plane, their actual personalities aren't employed in any sort of exposition at all. The sound is where things get pretty good, with a feisty OST carrying the player along as they make their way through the proverbial cakewalk that is Stahlfeder. Stage 2 definitely has the best track of the lot, with the rest being decent to passable. Stahlfeder's sound effects aren't completely terrible either, though the effects for lasers aren't especially great. Rounding out the presentation is a simple menu system, a fairly plain configuration menu, and an equally plain ranking table. Not fantastic, but far from terrible. There is a neat option to change the color of bullets and missiles though. So how does Stahlfeder stack up? Let's take a look. Stahlfeder's control is easily the strongest part of this game. Responsive and precise, it makes an already easy game even more playable for newbies. On the other side of the scale, veterans will find Stahlfeder's difficulty, or lack thereof, laughable. Still fantastic for super green shmup ultra novices though. At just 6 stages and the need to boost the difficulty to as high as it will go, there's not a lot of staying power to Stahlfeder in the end. Visually, there's a good amount of stuff going on in Stahlfeder and its designs and environments are pretty neat, if simple. Stahlfeder's sound is good with a solid OST and decent sound effects. In terms of ingenuity, there's not much to Stahlfeder's gameplay that wasn't already a thing in the past. This is an ultra easy ride-in with a life gauge, way too many bombs, and the ability to use lasers and guns anytime without having to pick up another item to do it. Stahlfeder is a pretty uncommon game, so prices are pretty high these days. It's fun, but maybe not enough for anyone other than a player looking to acquire all of the PlayStation's exclusive shooting titles. That makes its cost to value a little iffy. Stahlfeder is a game that I enjoyed quite a bit despite its shortcomings. It makes me want to track down a copy of Airgrave, also by Santos, to see what it's all about too. Stahlfeder is pricey though, so this might be a title for completionists only in the end. Though if others out there are like us, they might just find a chill, carefree, plane-based shooter just under the mediocre surface. Stahlfeder gets a 3.25 out of 5. You can get a copy of Stahlfeder at auction today, just be sure to buy low. Stahlfeder's cover captivated me. It's pretty in your face while also being sterile and mechanical. Pretty cool stuff, but I wish the game was a little more engaging. And I know, this wasn't a Salt Android Cactus. It's coming, I promise, but both Dan and I need to be available at the same time to play, record, and narrate the episode. It'll be soon, I hope. In the meantime though, we have another episode of Shooting Game Chronicle incoming that is sure to please, and a shmup that brings its exposition to heights unseen. See you in the next episode.